And what a great day it is to make a pie. It's raining out and we're going to make a strawberry rhubarb custard pie from scratch. We have all the ingredients right here at our fingertips, so we will start by making a pie crust from scratch. Now, yes, you can go to the store and you can buy a Pillsbury rollout pie crust, but if you look at the ingredients, you'll see there are undesirable things in ready-made products. So we're going to make our pie crust from scratch, and it will consist of flour, butter, margarine, salt, and sugar. And it will be yummy. So let's proceed with a basic pie dough. And we're actually going to have enough to make 2 bottom crusts because this particular pie has a brown sugar crumble topping. So I guess we're going to make 2 of them, and won't they be yummy to eat? All right, we will start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And we just happen to have some right here. All righty. I didn't grab a knife, but a fork will do just fine. Okay, so we'll get all the air out, level it off. 1 cup. And this is regular, unbleached white flour. You want to make sure you don't use self-rising flour. 2 cups. Okay. We're going to seal our flour up right away. We keep our flour in an airtight container. It's a giant Tupperware container, and that way we know that our flour will never get buggy because it's in an airtight container. We've had this container for years. Alrighty, we're done with the flour. Okay, the next thing we need is 1 teaspoon of salt. And I forgot the salt, so I have to go get it. I am so hungry for strawberry rhubarb custard pie. An old-fashioned recipe, something that I think my grandmother used to make. Our basic pie dough is coming from The Joy of Cooking. It's a wonderful cookbook. Everything you ever want to know. And their pie crust recipe is foolproof. So we have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to go a little light on the salt. I usually do. So it calls for a teaspoon. I'm going to use a little bit less. I personally don't need the salt. All right. Then pie crust is kind of a favorite. I always like to put a little sugar in it. I think it gives it a little bit more flavor. And I've got about a teaspoon of white granulated sugar. Okay. Sometimes if I'm making an apple or a peach pie, I might even put a little cinnamon in the pie crust. Okay, next thing we need, 2/3 of a cup of chilled leaf lard or shortening. And for our shortening, we're using a high quality spread here. So 2/3 of a cup. Well, let's see. 1/3 of a cup is 5 1/3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, here we go. 2/3 of a cup is about this much. Looks like about a stick and a third. All right. You could use lard if you wanted to. I'm sure that my grandmother would have used lard. Lard isn't really a common commodity to find anymore, and I'm going to cut this into bits because when I take my fork and blend it all together, it will blend much easier if it's in small pieces. So for anyone who's ever been intimidated by making a pie crust, fear no more. It's an easy recipe. So after you've cut up your margarine, it should look like this, in with your flour and your salt and your sugar. All right, the next ingredient is butter, real butter, and this is salted butter. And that's another reason why I use a little bit less salt, because the butter is salted. All right, and I need 2 tablespoons, and you want your butter to be chilled, because when it's chilled, it's quite firm and easy to handle, and you don't want it to be mushy. All right, so here is my chilled butter, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut it up into little pieces because it's much easier to mix and incorporate if it's been cut up. Okay, so there we go. So now it looks like this. And the next thing I'm going to do, I have a bowl here with cold water in it. And to this unlikely mixture, I am going to put 4 tablespoons of water. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And now the fun begins, because now my job is to take a fork, and this could take 5 minutes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fork, and I'm going to try to break up every bit of butter and stir it around and work it with the fork, breaking it up. They do make a tool called a pastry blender. I never had much luck with one of those. A fork works just fine. So I'll use my fork and I'll just mash it up, and in just a few minutes I'll have a very nice dough that can be rolled out. Alright, if need be, you can actually get your hand in there and work that dough to get it good and mixed.
If need be?
If need be. And if you have to add an extra spoon of water, that's alright too. So it should look like this. Nicely mixed, it's a ball of dough. Now, you could roll it up in saran wrap and put it in your refrigerator for a while if you wanted to. You could even freeze it if you wanted to. But I am going to cut it in half, and I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not going to weigh it on a kitchen scale. I want 2 halves, making 2 pies, and I'm going to roll them out. And there's my pie crust pans right there, my pie pans right there. So, set the one aside. It's a little bit sticky. It would be easier to roll if I chilled it, but I'm not going to chill it because I want to make my pie now. All right. I am the impatient chef. I never plan ahead, and when I want it now. And so, I'm going to put a little flour here so it doesn't stick. I want to roll it around so that it's coated with the flour so that it doesn't stick. This is my rolling pin, and I am going to roll out. I'm going to turn it over, sprinkle a little more flour on it, because I don't want it to stick. I don't want it to wrap around the rolling pin. I want a nice round shape, so I will rotate it and roll it out. And if it looks like it's being a little sticky, just put a little more flour on it. It's moving around pretty freely, so it's not sticking, but it needs to be a whole lot bigger. So we'll flip it and we'll flour it. Now you want it to be round. Tupperware used to make a plastic sheet that had circles drawn on it. That was a great outline for rolling out your pie crust. I don't know, I had one, I don't know what happened to it. But this isn't too perfectly round, but it'll work. I'm going to roll it out. I want it to be pretty thin. Okay, now the next trick is, how do I transfer it to the pie pan? And it's not a perfectly round shape. It'll be fine. I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to fold it back against itself, I'm going to take my pie pan, I'm going to pick the whole thing up, sticking just a little bit right there, I'm going to lay it here, I'm going to unfold it, and with a little bit of luck, it'll fill the pan. Now, you may say, well, it looks like you got some problem areas here. never fear, because we're going to cut the excess off right here, and we're going to put it right here. No one will ever know. Alrighty, there we go. And we've got a little more excess here. We'll just lop that right off, and patch that right there. And there's a little thin spot right here. We'll put that right there, stick that on. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it under and pinch it to give myself a nice shape. And I'm just pinching it between two fingers. Now my mother used to come up with a really cool design. I don't know how she pinched it. I'd like to know. I should have paid attention before she passed away. Alright, so here's my little patch area. It won't show. I've got quite a bit of overhang here. I'm going to just lop that off, and we'll put that in the bowl with the other half. Maybe that half is a little smaller. Alright, so I'm going to roll it under and pinch it. Okay, so I get a nice what appears to be edge. There we go. Okay, so it should look something like this. And this little area that I've patched, that won't even show when it's full of pie, so it's perfectly fine. So there's the one. Looks great. Okay, and now set it aside right here, and we'll take our dough, put a little flour down here. I don't know why it was sticky right there, but it was. Alright, so we'll roll our flour around, and here is our new piece of dough. We're going to coat it with flour so that it doesn't stick. Roll it kind of all around, put a little more flour down there. If you do have an excess of pie crust, you can always put it in a little baking dish and sprinkle a little cinnamon and sugar on it. uxwbill probably remembers me doing that. Remember me doing that?
The cinnamon pies?
The little cinnamon sugar pie crust.
Yes, those things were an awesome part of my childhood.
A nice treat for little kids. Alright. Now the concept is, if you start with a round shape, when you roll it out, it should stay a round shape.
I'm sure someone's going to ask about this in the comments, why the microwave is sitting over there running for so long.
Oh, we're thawing dinner.
We're doing a little bit of late-breaking chicken thawing with inverter turbo defrost over there, which is also why you can hear the sound of the fan changing as the inverter in the microwave modulates the magnetron. And that's as much technical talk as we're going to get into in this video.
Never was one to plan too far ahead. Okay, this shape is a little bit rounder. You can kind of steer your rolling pin around. Stretch it out kind of in the direction you need it to go. Okay, easy peasy pie crust. Much better than store-bought. That looks pretty good. Okay, what do? I gently fold half of it back. Put my pie pan right here. Lift it up. Drag it over. And fold the top half back. Eureka! There we go. I'm going to push it down. There we go. And we got a little bit better coverage here. And we do have some extra that we'll just cut off at this point in time, and we'll think of something to do with it. So I suppose we could make a little cinnamon and sugar pie crust. A treat from your childhood. Okay. Sometimes I'll take the extra pie crust and make little leaves or little decorations for the pie. But And I suppose I could do this, but because this pie is going to have a brown sugar crumb top, well, I suppose we could still do some decorations. It's fun to make little leaves or berries out of the extra crust. Okay, so we kind of tuck it under to make an edge. And we do want to be careful when we bake this pie, because this could be kind of a juicy one, and we just hate that when it rolls over, when it boils over in the oven, and then you've got to clean the oven. And UXWB particularly hates that when I make a big mess in the oven. So
our oven is a self-cleaning oven in the truest sense of the term.
yeah, we clean it ourselves. Okay, so the crust is a little thin right here, but I think it's fine. So there we have it. 2 pie crusts ready to go, and now we'll start the filling. Okay, so for our rhubarb custard strawberry pie, which my mouth is literally watering for, we're going to start off with some stalks of rhubarb. Now if you're lucky enough to have rhubarb in your yard, this is the time to pick it, the spring. You don't want the stalks to get big, and you don't want it to go to seed. And the one thing that you always want to remember, rhubarb leaves are poisonous. So when I selected these stalks, I looked for the reddish color, and I looked for stalks that were slender and young, the newer shoots. So I am going to be making 2 pies. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my rhubarb into small bits.
This is actually rhubarb that came from right next door to my late grandfather's house, which is where the keykeeper lives now. It grows right alongside the driveway. And here again we have an irritating interruption.
Alright, so your rhubarb is diced up. It looks kind of like this, and it's very, very tart, so you probably want to resist the temptation to taste it. So 1 cup here, not quite a cup here, and we need a total of 3 cups because we're doubling our recipe. So now we're off to the garden to harvest more rhubarb, and it's raining out.
So here we are on location at the keykeepers, getting some more rhubarb. There's one plant right there, and there's another one over here. And again, the leaves are poisonous. The stems are fine, but the leaves are poisonous. Stay away.
Okay.
So you've got some there. Show it to us.
Okay. Here is some rhubarb right here. And let's see, what do I need? I need a little over a cup. Yeah, this ought to be plenty. So David's got a compost pile over here. So
Looks like there are some leaves from rhubarb here already.
Yep. We'll just cut the leaves off. Okay. So here we go. So here's 5 stalks of rhubarb. That ought to be a cup, easily. All right, tally-ho. Okay, we're back, and we need 3 cups of chopped rhubarb. And although this was outside in the rain, and I know it hasn't been around chemicals or pesticides, we did go ahead and give it a real good rinse in the sink. So we'll just go ahead and dice these up, and if you're not lucky enough to have rhubarb growing in your yard or your son's yard, you can sometimes see it in the stores, and you can sometimes even find it frozen at a really good grocery store. But it is a seasonal product, so right now is when it's growing fresh in the yard. So this is cup number 2. And So we want 3 cups. So you can cook it down like you would with apples and make a really nice rhubarb sauce. It does take a lot of sugar because it's very, very tart. So I'm not worrying about the size. I'm just dicing this up into small pieces. So aesthetically speaking, if you're going to eat something, small pieces are more appealing than great big hunks. All right. So we've just got a little bit left. So I guess that's just going to be waste for today. So we've got a nice full 3 cups of diced rhubarb, fresh diced rhubarb. All right, uxwbill, what do we do next?
Well, the words are cut off the edge of a page, but I think it says place rhubarb in a bowl and cover with boiling water for about 5 minutes.
Okay. So what we're going to do, my interpretation of this is, I'm going to put this in a saucepan, I'm going to cover it with water, I'm going to bring it up to a quick simmer. And what that will do is that will break down the fibrous material of the rhubarb. It'll make it tender. In the pie cooking process, it may not cook long enough to really get soft and tender. And you wouldn't want tough, stringy rhubarb in your pie. You want it to be nice and soft. So we will just do a little parboil, just real quick in a little boiling water, just to tender it up. And we'll just kind of judge that. If it gets kind of soft, that's how we want it.
Meanwhile, as our rhubarb is coming to a boil, over here in the sink, we have strawberries. These are the strawberries that we're going to use in the pie. And as with any kind of produce, you want to make sure that they have been thoroughly washed.
Okay, the next part, we're going to make the custard. And we need 2 eggs. And I'm going to take a quick look at our rhubarb over here. Just a moment. See how that's doing. Okay. Okay, it has come to a boil. And we're just going to let it sit there for like 5 minutes. Okay.
While it's sitting, we'll return to the exciting topic of custard making.
Okay, so we have 2 eggs, and what else do we need?
Well, let's see here. We need some sugar. We'll need 2 cups of white sugar.
2 cups.
Quite a bit of sugar in it,
Quite a
apparently.
bit of sugar. We'll have to get a different canister. And how much flour?
We need, let's see here, 4 tablespoons of flour.
Okay.
Since we are doubling the recipe.
Okay, so 1, 2. The custard is truly the best part. Sweet and creamy, it will be absolutely delicious. So, but I didn't realize we were going to have to use so much sugar. I mean, it makes sense, but we're going to have to transfer that to a bigger bowl. All right, so...
We'll find a bigger bowl.
Well, I just happen to have one right here that we use the pie crust in. All righty, so...
Here's a little bit more pie crust you might want to get.
All righty. So we haven't decided what we're going to do with our pie crust.
I'll tell you what, this is fast turning into the city waterworks. Which
That's
drip do you
right.
want?
Okay, our custard topping we're going to put in a larger bowl. And what we've got here is 4 tablespoons of flour and 2 eggs.
We haven't added the sugar yet.
Nope. And so...
By the way, that is a bowl that my mother made that she's presently cleaning the old mixture out of.
Okay, very stylish too. All right, so I'm going to take a fork and I just really want to incorporate this together. I want to break the yolks, and this is the custard part of the pie. The egg and the sugar and the flour is going to make a delicious, delicious custard. Okay, and we are doubling our recipe because we're going to make 2 pies. So now we need 2 cups of white sugar.
And our rhubarb is ready.
Yep. So we can drain that in just a minute. In fact, I've got a colander right over here that I can pour it and let it do its thing while we're custarding. Okay. There we go. All right. Our rhubarb now has a much softer consistency.
Yes, it's cooked down quite a bit.
Yes, it has. Which is pretty much just what we want. All right. Now we need 2 cups of white sugar for our custard. I have a 1/2 cup measure here because it's easier to dip in and scoop with a 1/2 cup measure. So that's a 1/2, 1 and a 1/2, 2. Alrighty. Now, where's the lid? Don't know.
Fall on the floor.
Okay, so what I want to do is I want to incorporate
You can really see how it's
flour.
turning to custard, and for
Yep.
once that doesn't mean a bad thing.
the flour, sugar, and egg. I just want to incorporate it together with my fork, okay? And although it seems like a lot of sugar, we will be dividing this between 2 pies, and the rhubarb is very, very tart. Okay, so this will mix in with the fruit juices, and it will be delicious. All right, so the next thing we have to do is slice up 1½ cups of strawberries. I'm not sure how many strawberries that's going to be, but it could take a while to very nice and neatly slice them up. So I'll get ready to do that, and
We'll be right back, thanks to the magic of video editing.
okay, these are beautiful strawberries. They're nice and big, and it's not going to take very many of them for 1½ cups. So I'm slicing them, and this is a 1 cup measure, so there we go. Actually, I think we're going to need 3 cups of strawberries because 1½ cups was the amount needed for 1 pie. You want to check on that, UXW Bill?
Yes, I will in just a minute here. These are all of our freshly cut strawberries, but now we're going to take a little bit of a detour and change gears for the topping.
The topping of this pie is a brown sugar streusel or a crumble type topping, and I thought it would be a good idea to have that ready to go to sprinkle on the fruit as soon as we get the fruit in the pie crust so that it can immediately go into the oven. So this pie does not have a crust on top. It has a brown sugar crumble topping, which should be a little crunchy and a little sweet and just really be a wonderful addition. So we'll start with, I'll let UXW Bill tell me the ingredients that I need.
You need to start with 6 tablespoons of flour.
6 tablespoons of flour, and that would be level tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, we'll seal our flour up again so it stays nice and fresh. All right, we have 6 tablespoons of flour. What do we need next?
4 tablespoons of brown sugar.
Okay, Well, this could be interesting. I've got my brown sugar in a large mason jar, and I'm going to need something with a long handle that I
Yes,
can...
it's turned into a gigantic brown sugar clump.
Well, it shouldn't be hard, and it isn't, because the mason jar keeps it airtight. Now, if your brown sugar is ever hard, all you have to do is put a wedge of apple in the jar and close it up for a day or so, and it will be soft again. The moisture from the wedge of apple will soften the brown sugar. So, this isn't hard. So what do I need, did you say?
You need 4 tablespoons.
4 tablespoons. Well, let's see if we can easily do that. And typically brown sugar is packed. So there's 1. Well, that wasn't too difficult. We'll scoop some out. I like keeping things in mason jars because it does keep them airtight and fresh, but the brown sugar is a bit of a challenge to get out. Okay, there's 2. Okay. Here's some more. I really don't want to get brown sugar all over the place, although the kitchen is due for a good cleaning, as you have probably observed.
Well, you know what they say, a messy kitchen is a happy kitchen, and this kitchen, of course, as always, is delirious.
Well, maybe I can actually scoop in there with the spoon. This is light brown sugar. I don't think it matters if you have light brown or dark brown. There we go. Close enough for government work. Okay, and we'll put the lid back on there. That does keep it nice and airtight. There we go.
So we're ready for our final ingredient in the topping, and that would be 4 tablespoons of butter.
4 tablespoons of butter. Well, I happen to have that right here. Okay.
Measure twice, cut once.
There we go. Okay. And the butter is chilled, and so, just like I did with the pie crust, helps if you take all the wrapper off the butter. It looks just like butter. Okay. Okay, they should make the wrappers like red paper so that they're easier to see, but...
Yeah, sometimes it is kind of hard to tell the difference.
Okay.
Especially when you've cut all the graduations and other printing off of it.
Okay, so I'm cutting the butter into little pieces, and when I mix it to incorporate it, it should be just kind of crumbly. And I think that the easiest way to do this is going to be with my hand. So I'll get my hand in here, and I can squeeze the little pieces of butter apart and incorporate this.
Okay, we have reached the point where everything is just about to come together into one finished pie. We have our topping, we have our custard, we have strawberries, we have rhubarb.
Okay.
And of course we also have 2 pie crusts.
Yeah. What are we going to do with 2 pies?
It seemed like a good idea when we got started.
Okay.
We kind of batted around the idea of freezing one of them.
Here's my custard. Now the custard's pretty stiff, but the juice from the fruit will soften it up quite a bit. Okay, so we've got 3 cups of strawberries.
And a little extra.
Sliced up. And we can start to stir that around. And we've got our rhubarb. Okay. So, this is what it looks like. And what we need to do is we need to incorporate it. Now, you'd want to do this by hand because you want to be gentle. You wouldn't want to put this in a mixer. The pieces are way too big, and a mixer would just mash everything up. So all we want to do is incorporate, just kind of turn it over
It's starting to look really well mixed right now.
And so the rhubarb has made the custard much more like liquidy.
Much more compliant.
Yes. And I think there's a strawberry leaf. I think we'll get that right out of there. There you go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide this filling between these two pies. And the best way that I know how to do that is with a cup measure. So we'll load up one, get it in there, and we'll load up another one, get it in there, trying not to make too much of a drippy mess. Okay.
So you've got pretty much everything out of there, just a little bit of remnant. And we'll favor one of the pies with that. Doesn't really matter which one.
Okay. Lots of dirty dishes. So, this is not a deep dish pie pan. And I guess I had hoped that it would fill it a little bit fuller, because it's always nice to have a nice domed, full pie. But the advantage here is, since it's not brimming to the very tippy top, hopefully it won't overflow. Okay, now I'm going to use that same method of distribution with a smaller cup measure, so that I'm sure each pie gets the same amount of topping. Okay, so this is my topping, which I will try to very evenly distribute and sprinkle, and this will incorporate into the filling, and it should be a sweet, crunchy topping. Okay, and this is 1/3 of a cup measure. So, okay. Oops, we'll slide this one over here a little bit. Okay. So the butter is still in kind of little nuggets, but it'll melt and it should be just fine. So everybody gets 2/3 of a cup of topping. So we'll bake it, and then we will be sure to show you an after picture when it comes out of the oven, and it will make the whole kitchen smell heavenly. A little bit of vanilla ice cream or a little Cool Whip will be just the perfect touch for our strawberry rhubarb custard pie.
So, you remember this little fellow? Well, there's something we can do with that little schnit as well.
All right, so here's our leftover pie crust, and we're going to make a treat that all the kids used to love. We'll take our leftover pie crust. Got a strawberry leaf stuck on my thumb there. So here's our leftover pie crust. Just a little bit. We're going to pat it out until it's thin. I suppose I could roll it, but we'll pat it out. And there's a piece of rhubarb. Okay, we'll pat it out until it's nice and thin. And we've got it's ovenware, anchor hocking. It's just a glass little ovenware dish. So here's our piece of pie crust, which we will lay in here, and we can even stretch it out. Doesn't matter how thin it is. We'll stretch it out a little bit by just turning it around and around. Okay, so what are we going to do to make this extra special? Well, we're going to take about a tablespoon of white granulated sugar. Okay. And we're going to take some cinnamon. Just shake some in there. There you go. And we're going to stir it up. So we have cinnamon and sugar. Okay. And then we're simply going to take it and we're going to sprinkle it over the pie crust. And when we bake the pies, we'll just pop this in the oven as well. And we'll have to watch it for a few minutes. We'll have to watch it because it won't take as long to cook as the pies. And it'll just be a fun little treat if you've got kids in your family. They will love their cinnamon and sugar pie crust treat made with a little bit of extra pie crust. There you go.
As proof that we waste very, very little around here in terms of materials, the cinnamon and sugar that was left over from our little kids' treat pie went onto the crust of the two large pies as an additional bit of flavor and garnish. Here's how the little cinnamon pie turned out. We're still waiting on the big pies to come out of the oven, but when they do, you'll get to see them as well. Doesn't that just look absolutely incredible? These are the finished pies. Strawberry rhubarb custard pie. And they look and smell absolutely amazing. I'm sure they will be awesome by the time they have cooled, which they have to do before you can eat one, of course.
Well, I don't know about that.
So, thank you as always for watching, and certainly do feel free to leave a comment if you happen to have one.